Welcome to day 8 of the Creative Vulnerability series. Today I have a guest, Nopal Flower, that is Mariana Franco. And yeah, let me put this in the comments and then pin it and invite a few people. Hmm. Hello. Go ahead and request to be on the live. Hi, Tan. Welcome.
Hey, Kundan. Good morning.
Good morning.
Love it.
So I'm in the park today, just like yesterday.
I love
And
it. It's
yeah.
sometimes a good thing to be out in the sunshine,
hmm
although it's
Yeah.
gloomy.
Although it's a little cloudy and cold today. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. That's why I'm all bundled up in this jacket and shirt.
Oh, that's so nice. Maybe
Yeah.
it'll still stay like this for the rest of the day. I
hmm
can get some
Yeah.
outside air.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Then yesterday I didn't bring any books because I was using my other forms of creative expression themselves as prep work for my writing,
hmm
which is a fun way of doing it. And that's why I talked about, I even talked about the difference between creativity as just a release for your own mental health versus creativity towards building, something long term, like a body of work, like a book or a movie or an album, you know.
hmm
And I think there's a difference between those two and how it comes through for you, you know.
Okay.
There's more pressure with building a long-term body of work, I think, which is why some people have, go through some blocks. So yeah. But today I brought a few books. This is what I brought today. Write Yourself a Lantern, The Most Spectacular Mistake by Natalia
Mm,
Bayer. Your Wound, My Garden, And that's based on their title poem, which is really powerful. Had some powerful lines when they said, uh, "I've made I've made a home in your shame.
Mm,
Watch me bloom. You know,
mm.
your wound is my garden. Watch me bloom."
I love
Yeah.
it.
And then this is Hinduism and nature, and a lot of my poems recently have been inspired by that book, Hinduism and Nature, especially my nature poems.
Mm,
And spontaneous creativity, which is what I quoted from in our flyer that I posted yesterday, which
mm-hmm,
is a quote about not rushing the process, right? Which is really what all of these daily lives are about. To, and that's why I call it Creative Vulnerability Series, because because a lot of creatives are not willing to share their process, there's an
mm-hmm,
illusion or a delusion that uh, it happens quickly, when in reality it happens in stages, and and so we don't have to beat ourselves up if the ideas or the inspiration or the results don't come like quickly enough, you know. And that's why I decided to be vulnerable and be an example and show the first stage, show my prep work in real time, what I do before I even write a single line of my own poetry or story.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Mm.
I know there's a book
Yeah.
somewhere I wanted to use for today, but anyways, I love it. I love it. All right. So, yeah, I'm here. What? How did you want to do this? Did you want to like ask me questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you your creative process and to reiterate, what I tell people daily, the four stages of creativity documented by Graham Wallace and also quoted by David Kadavi in his book, Mind Management, Not Time Management, Productivity and Creativity Matters, which is a book that I've been quoting from almost every day as well. Uh, so the four stages are preparation, incubation, which is just taking a break from the work, then illumination, which is that quick flash of insight, often associated with creativity, and then there is verification and implementation. And although it's listed in that order, it doesn't necessarily always go in that order. Sometimes the illumination comes first, and then you go into verification mode and more preparation, and then you go back into incubation, and then for the final step, there is another moment of illumination. That's
Mhm,
also what happens sometimes, especially with stuff that have more moving parts in them, like a
mhm,
song, right? A song has the melody and the lyrics. A movie has many moving parts. Animation, which is what I do sometimes. I draw first, then I paint first.
mhm,
Sometimes I draw with crayons. Then I take a photograph and then I animate it. So different stages in between the two. So sometimes it's important to have that incubation period even in between the different stages as well.
mhm. Feel like there needs to be a part where it's like purging because
Mhm.
sometimes you need to not necessarily, well, yeah, be able to clear out, right? Sometimes either clutter, uh, whether it's in your writing, making space, right,
Mhm.
for 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 you to be able to create,
Mhm.
um, and like there'll be
Clearing
moments
space,
where
yeah.
I will go through old journals of mine
Mhm.
and rip out what I like to keep and
Mhm.
make it new,
Yeah.
or fuse a few things together so as to again make it different,
Mhm.
or just what is it? not compensate, but just make a why am I losing words? But anyways,
Yeah.
it's a good fusion of something old or two or three several pieces and then just just making a combination with it.
Hmm.
So, but I think that there definitely should be something about purging because
I agree.
it's a good thing to do from time to time, especially if you feel
Yeah.
like you have too much, then you can let go of certain things.
Yeah.
Um, so.
Yeah, that can be part of the preparation stage, but you're right. It should be like a step zero where before you even do anything. In fact, this book that I quoted from in Our Flyers, Spontaneous Creativity, purging is basically like the very first thing he recommends. And he in fact he talks about this very specific practice where you look at the empty space, like you said. You look at
Mhm,
the empty space between the sky and you,
mhm,
and then you go into, you just feel into all of the emotional turmoil that you're feeling and the
mm,
mental turmoil. And you make a specific sound called ah,
mm,
and that sound ah helps purge, it helps dissipate that emotional turmoil. And he says that even a tiny little bit of space created from
mhm,
that is better than nothing. It's progress. So whatever you need to do to purge, like whether it's making the sound ah, or like you said, literally like cleaning up your room,
mhm,
or even cleaning up the space where you're about to create something, cleaning up your
mhm,
desk.
mhm,
That's progress. Like even a tiny little bit is important.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. I have to agree. It
Yeah.
feels great. That's kind of
Yeah.
what I was doing actually this weekend, these past few days was purging, was reorganizing and really trying to make the space more much more functional. So
Mm.
which is great because then now you can feel like, all right, that step is complete, and now it's like you can start doing those projects, working on those projects,
Mhm.
with that being not so much of a lingering thing of having to do. So, yeah, awesome. Well, I'm so glad I mentioned it.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so important, that that is why we need to have these conversations between artists, right? And learn from each other, and also like the importance of like mentorship and apprenticeship. That's also underestimated in this day and age. Like for me, like, I've mentioned like how this author, through this book has been my mentor for the last 4 years, and this book has been life changing. But also another thing that helped me was about 3 months ago. I subscribed to creativebug.com, and I took one of their classes by this artist. I think she's Japanese, yeah. And it's like a daily creative practice, right? 30 days of daily creative practice. But like the very first thing that she recommended was like to create space on your desk, right? Which is purging, like you said. So
Mhm,
that's what motivated me to like uh, clean up my desk, clean up like parts of my room, and also so creating that space and then creating additional space like right next to my bed, uh, where like specific books that I want to read often, I want it to be more easily accessible. And then I
mhm,
started putting a lot of my tools there, and that space combined with access really like increased my creativity, and that's because I suddenly had a mentor in addition to vicariously via the book as well, right? And I'm bringing that up because I watched a documentary about the Japanese artist Kurara and her father Hakusai, right?
mhm,
And they were very famous painters in Japan, and And even though they're not, that famous over here in the United States,
Mhm.
funnily enough, you've probably seen their iconic painting everywhere. Like it's in dental offices, it's in, hotel lobbies, you know.
Mhm.
So I never heard of them, but the moment I saw that painting in the movie, I'm like, oh my God, I've seen that painting before. Like I've seen it many times. So I'm like, oh my God, oh, like they painted that. It's yeah, it's the one with like the mountain in the background or in the right in the middle of the painting, and there are like huge water waves in front of
Mhm.
the mountain. So it turns out that mountain is actually Mount Fuji from in Japan. Uh, anyway, so that movie shows that back in the day, artists, especially these painters, let this plane go. I live near John Wayne Airport, in Irvine,
It
so
happens. It happens.
comes often.
You're not from a city or anything like that unless you hear one or two planes, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, they had like so she was an apprentice to her own father, but her father had many other apprentices. And these apprentices, before they would create even their own original work, like for many years, they would painstakingly copy brushstroke by brushstroke Hakusai's paintings. That's how they learned. That's how they built their skill. So
Mhm.
in that movie, there's a whole concept that I never even heard of before called matching your skill to your inspiration, right?
Mhm.
And your inspiration will always be greater than your skill because your skill comes from your human side, whereas your inspiration comes from, the you could call it by many names, right? The great mystery, the divine, right?
Mhm.
From something like so much bigger than you, both your subconscious and your superconscious, right?
Mhm.
And so it's because it's so much bigger than you, you might never match it. And I feel like how you respond to that as an artist can make or break you. Like you can actually despair at that, right?
Mhm.
It can break you or you enjoy the process. In fact, there's a point in the movie when Kurara was like just like crying and angry because she was getting all of these like amazing moments of inspiration, seeing all these colors. And speaking of color, by the way, this was a time when a lot of artists were making even their paints from scratch. They would grind stones and fruit and cook them and boil them. So even the paints they made themselves,
Mhm.
which is
So
amazing dedication.
what is the artist's name again? So I could spell it because Ten is asking for the artist's name.
Oh, Kurara and her father Hakusai.
Is it Akusai?
H wait, H A. Actually, I think I'm done. Here we go. I wrote put it down.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yay.
yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, Kurara and Hakusai, right? So
Mhm.
in that movie, like there was this moment when like Kurara was just angry and crying, and her father saw that, and her father was like, "Hey, what's wrong?" And she said, "I'm angry that I'm still not skilled enough after all these years." And that's when her father said, "Well, I am 70 right now, and I'm still trying to match my skill to my inspiration, still trying to build my skill, right?
Mhm.
And I may never get there 100%, but that's okay, right? It's the important thing is the journey to keep trying, right? And that reminds me of one of the things that I said in my poems, right? In my poetry, when I said infinity is the opposite of perfection, where we may never match infinity totally, but the very fact that we keep trying changes us, makes our art better and better every day. And yeah,
I think it can also be that your skill won't match your inspiration. Um, so as to not compare yourself to who or what inspires you, right? Because
Exactly.
you're going
Because
to be,
she looked
you'll,
up to her father a lot. Yeah.
it's like you'll be on your own path.
Yeah.
So what they do might not be what you'll end up doing, right? You'll
Right.
create your own style. You'll,
Yeah.
um, be able to have a different form, a different process. And so to try and be to replicate or so somebody else's style and form
Yeah.
kind of would then diminish that person in the sense of like, well then, because you don't want to be a copier,
Right.
you want to be your own self. You want to
Yeah.
discover as
Authentic.
well
Yeah.
as your own self, your own
Authentic.
process.
Yeah. And do
So
you have the patience
hmm
that someday you will discover your own self, right?
hmm
Without, yeah, without going into all of these different forms of, resistance, right?
hmm
One of which is uh, because we get impatient. We don't want to discover our own self, not want to build the skill first, and then we just want to be, going to the other extreme of just being completely like the person that we idolize, right? In fact, that was also in the movie. Funnily enough, now that you mention it, because later on in the movie, she started going into later on in her own life, but she started going into the other extreme when she was so good at copying her father's skill of matching, of becoming skilled, that she started losing her passion, her own individuality,
hmm
and so in the beginning, a lot of collectors and colleagues could tell the difference between her work and her father's because it wasn't skilled enough, right? But
hmm
then later on, they could still tell the difference because now it was too skilled, and there was no passion in it anymore. And one of her colleagues pointed it out, and like, there's no like I can still tell because now there's no passion in it. And at first he was angry, but then he was like he was actually being kind, and he literally said, he started drawing her out and said, "Talk to me about what inspires you." And she started talking about it, and that's when he looked at her and said, "Oh my God, like you don't even know how good you are. Like it's sickening how much you don't know, you know, how amazing you are." And that's when she started stepping her own into her own individuality as well. And her own
hmm
life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really important. That's
Yeah.
why I think it's great to, when you're learning a process, sometimes it's great to have various processes,
Mm-hmm.
of doing a body of work or several bodies of works. Um, I like to dive into to art, to drawing. Um, I will have, I'm just gonna throw these out here. I have several journals that I work on. So, and each one has something different, or each one is based on something different. Um, but it helps to kind of um, clear your mind a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just discover different things about yourself, about your process, and each one can spark something completely different.
Exactly.
Uh, with technology the way it is as well, we can bookmark, as we're scrolling through websites, different web pages that uh, might inspire us, might spark an interest in us. We can find different interests now, right? We can find more information now about what interests us, even if it's discovering what an acronym or uh, means from a particular organization. Um, you know, and screenshot screenshots from your phone, also another thing that you can use and utilize when you see different information. Like I love screenshotting comments uh,
I
while
do
I'm
too. I
live.
love it. Yeah.
And that's a good portion of where I get my my prompts from is
Mhm.
from the screenshots that I do during the comments. Because somebody
Oh,
will say something and you're like, I was like, that sounds like my brain will just put that in a different perspective, or a memory sparks from
mhm.
whatever someone says, and it might not even have to do with what's being spoken about. It's just that's how my brain kind of catches little glimpses, right?
Mhm.
And I'm about to write that down because it's like, ooh, little glimpses.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
speaking of screenshots, for those who don't know, have you heard of Google Lens?
uh, oh yeah, it's on your
It's on
camera,
your
right?
phone.
Yes,
It's on your
yes.
phone.
You could
It is
take
on your
pictures of
camera as well,
something.
but any picture that you take, including screenshots, there is a Google Lens button. And what's really cool about Google Lens is that uh, from if you like something from a physical book,
Hmm.
right? In the past, I had to like label and type it into my computer, which is a
Hmm.
lot of work. Now I just take a picture and use Google Lens to select all, copy and paste into my phone. And more recently, I learned that you can also copy and paste directly into your computer,
Okay.
into your Word file, into your because it's connected. If you connect your phone, if your phone is pre-connected to your computer, it also can be. You also have the option to copy and paste directly into any Word file in your computer, which is something really that part I learned only a few days ago. I knew about copy paste into my phone, but I'm like, oh my god, I can do it on my computer. It literally just showed up on my computer. I'm like, oh my god, this is magic.
I love it. I love it. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to do that now because
yeah,
yeah, that would make so much. Yeah, I love it. Oh, yay! Because I have a
I
Google phone
love it.
myself, so
Yeah, as an
I know
Android. Yeah.
there's features on this thing that I'm like I have not utilized this enough. But I love the lens because when I go on walks around, uh, like especially when I go on walks with my dad, he'll see certain plants and he'll tell me stories about the plants because some of them they remind him of home, and which is really great. And so he came across a salted cedar tree and
Mm.
started telling me how these are really great plants to use for creating
Oh, yeah, I
homes,
think somebody told me you can use Google Lens to also take a picture of leaves and plants
and
and
it'll
figure out what.
identify them.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
how I did it with the particular plant he was showing me. He was just showing me the branch,
Mhm.
and the branch is kind of stringy. Actually, it's very interesting. Cows love to eat it, so they'll graze on it or so. But it's also really good for creating walls for homes when you would do like adobe houses and stuff back in the day. And so I thought it was really great to see that. And then just because he's all like, yeah, he called them pinos salados or something like that. And I was like, what? I was like, okay. And I looked it up, and that's exactly what they're called. They're called salted cedars, salt cedars. I
That's
was like,
cool. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, it's cool.
Oh,
But
also Google Lens even has an audio button where after you select all, you can have it read to you, so you can hear the words.
man, I'm gonna so play with my camera later on today. I didn't even know. I didn't know. That's so great.
Yeah,
Okay, we're gonna have to do like what is it? A not an introduction, but definitely some kind of workshop in regards to Google phones because
yeah,
they have a lot. So I'm appreciative of the phone. It's definitely tools that we can utilize for our creative process, and
exactly. Yeah.
being in a different environment also helps tremendously. Like you being outside, I was like, being outside would have been a good idea, but I just need to make sure the phone doesn't die.
Yeah.
So,
And it works on all Android phones, so all Google phones. Yeah,
okay. All right.
yeah, yeah.
Yay. Okay.
So, so yeah. Oh yeah. Recently, Coach Josh told me that my poetry now is different. Like it's he was like he liked it before, but now like it's still like it has a yeah. There's almost like a more like I feel like a certain amount of more depth and nuance to it, and I feel like watching that movie, that biopic about Kurara
Mm-hmm.
really influenced me because when I watched it, it reminded me of how, because I also study marketing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I've read and heard that the best copywriters or sales writers, right? What they do is they would copy by hand, just like those painters back in the day, the most effective sales letters of all time of in history, and they would copy the whole thing over and over again to get that muscle memory before they start writing their own copy. That's how they
Mm-hmm.
learn and build their skill. And then eventually, of course, they, just like Carrara, they would step into their own individuality eventually, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's how they learn. It really inspired me to to change my process a little bit. That's how I started, this practice of um, copying by hand my favorite verses from the books that I read or my favorite
Mm-hmm.
passages, and then starting using bibliomancy as well, where I would um, take my three books that are calling me that morning or that moment, and then
Mm-hmm.
copy the top three verses for the day, and then leave it for a few hours or even a few days, and then come back later. So that's leaving it for a few hours is that incubation stage, right? And then coming back later for the elimination. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's why my process has changed because now I am not only collecting these, I call it foraging through the forest of poetry berries and poetry fruits and grapes and collecting them and and letting it be turned into wine during the incubation stage by the great mother, right? Letting
Mm-hmm.
it, and then in the illumination stage, all I have to do is show up again, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My part, I feel like, is just showing up, doing my work, and that's what's changed, you know, my poetry as well. Like this new level of nuance is because of that.
Mm. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was younger, I had a few journals where I would write down lyrics to songs that I really enjoyed,
Mm,
um, copy down poems from poetry books that I would read, anthology books. I had a lot of anthology books, and they just and to this day I still do that, where I'll write down quotes that I
mm,
read from here and there. I mean, that's one of the great things about IG is that people will have these quotes,
mm,
and sometimes those really help in starting your day. Um, I would listen to actually comedian Stefan. They do uh,
yeah.
a
I
little
think
bit of
he's
prayer
still
in the
now,
morning.
right?
I think he is, but he does prayer every morning,
Mm,
Monday through Friday, and so I would start my day with listening to prayer, right? And he would pull out passages,
mm,
and just that little bit of a passage from the Bible would really help in for me to kind of see the whole day, right?
mm,
And see how that lesson kind of
mm,
manifested itself throughout the day. And sometimes it's really having patience with yourself, and having patience with other people, and just being able to really just use those words as kind of a calming sense. Um, but definitely, I still to this day kind of I'll copy different quotes or so of inspiration, and just just use it for um, whatever may come along.
I love that. Yeah. So tell me more about your creative process. You mentioned the very first step, which is purging, right? Which can be cleaning up your room or even just journaling in general. Can dumping everything in the page.
Yeah.
What else is there? Like,
Yeah, so purging, there's copying,
mm,
um, having various sorts of journals for the different stages.
mm,
Because sometimes, like for me, using a journal just for like daily things to do or keeping track of
mm,
my days helps out tremendously.
mm,
Um, and then having other journals for like the goals that I'm setting out for myself. Those help too because then it's you're keeping track of that as well. Um, and actually, right now, a friend of mine sent me a video in regards to how to help with blockages. And
mm,
this has to do with art, but I feel like this can do with anything else. And so what you do is you get washable markers and
mm,
you scribble on a page the various colors that you have. You drop water on it, let it, melt into each other. And
mm.
afterwards, when it's dry, you draw over what you see pop out from all those melted images. And so right now I let it dry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so after that, I'm going to use a black pen and start to look and see if I see any images come out. But I actually already have an image set in mind that I'm going to include, which is this.
That is
So,
so cool.
yeah. So I'm going to put that over this image. And so that's like another process. I like to have various
Almost like a
processes,
stencil kind of thing, you know? Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Thank you.
But the way you're doing it, there's so much surrender involved, and I really admire that. Like, it's this, like, letting go of the outcome because you don't know how the water
Mhm.
will, what will result from that water, you know?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's being okay with mistakes,
Hmm.
and
That's it. Yeah.
yeah, it's being okay with mistakes, and it's just again getting back into that process, getting back into that journey, and not the end result. And
Hmm.
to me, that's a good thing. This is actually a fresh journal, so I'm really excited because sometimes I will have a journal with me and not write on it for a few days to a few months to sometimes a couple of years. It's like, oh, this journal's for something, but I haven't done anything with it. And that I think is another thing too when it comes to purging is if there's things you haven't used, like there's kind of a rule, but it's not a rule, but it's something to kind of think about. If you haven't used something in over, say, 2 years or 3 years, maybe it's time to let it go or finally work on it, you know. Or it might be that it's in a different perspective now, you just haven't gotten to it. But whatever it is I think in that way, it's to really know, like, well, do you really have a passion for it? Do you really, it's to question and self reflect again, with the whole purging. And like I keep a lot of the books that I read, but am I essentially will I eventually read them again? And so that's what I was asking myself yesterday because I have a ton of books that I've read and I finished reading and I enjoyed each and every one of them. But if I don't think I'm going to come back to it, then maybe I need to let it go. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but if I really feel that, like, no, this was very insightful, or it just brought me a lot of happiness, like I really know this book, I really know this story, then I'll keep it. And it's difficult for me to get rid of anything that's paper related, book related. So to even just have a small list or pile of things that I'm getting rid of, it really does help to clear that pathway for something new to create, or maybe just having that space so then you can create, but you don't necessarily have to fill it.
Mm. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Exposure is so important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another
So
high schooler and Erica, welcome.
I know I see so many people coming in. I was like keeping it real with Sheila Riddell. I just saw her in Brooklyn speaking yesterday a little
Oh,
bit.
wow.
Brooklyn was doing a couple of poems on her live, and I just thought that was really great to see them. So yeah, yeah, too hard to let go. I know, Brooklyn, it's too hard.
Exactly. It is hard. That's why I like your criteria, is because one of the things that stopped me, right, is, oh, what if I read it again? What if I might need it again later, right? That's what stops me from letting it go. But your question, like, but really being honest with myself and asking, like, will I really read this again? And
Hmm.
if the answer is no, then it's time to let go. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in some ways too is discovering, finding a good local bookstore that maybe is willing or does, they do book trades
Mm,
or you get store credit. And that's what I used to do. I used to know two bookstores where I used to live where I could take a pile of books
mm,
and pretty much see if they would buy them. I would get store credit and I would just go there and buy. I'd allow myself one book from the amount of books that I would get rid of. And to me, that was helpful in the sense of, well, at least I know that someone else is going to read them again.
mm,
But also that helps me to be able to buy a book, um, that maybe I might be more interested in reading or so, depending on where my creative process is at.
mm.
And so
Yeah.
I'm really proud about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm in the lookout for a bookstore actually right now, and I might have two bookstores in mind.
Mm,
Um, I just have to see if one of them is still available and the other one, their hours are just always different.
mhm. Yeah.
Finding when they're
Yeah.
open. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Um,
that's where also libraries can help too, and especially now with technology. We have the Libby app where you can borrow through your local library and using your library card. You can borrow most books, including audiobooks as well as ebooks through your local library using the Libby app, for free. And then Libby is also connected to your Kindle, so you can opt to read your borrowed books on your Kindle.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a Kindle, but it would be
Yeah.
good to utilize the library. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think I'm surrounded by two or three nearby. There's definitely one close by. Um, but I
Yeah.
don't know. I've
Well, I
gone
mean,
through
like
it a
the
couple of
Kindle app
times.
on your Android phone,
Hmm.
you don't need the actual physical Kindle, just the app. And you don't even need the app. That's an option because you can also use other methods of reading the ebooks like EPUB or other stuff. I prefer the Kindle app just because it's more convenient. But I use an Android. I don't use my Kindle to read books usually.
I think I'm gonna be doing some visits to the library this summer.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like, thanks for reminding me. I was like, yes, the library.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. So yeah, various processes or various ways to process, I guess, information or ideas. Um,
Mm,
Reading books also helps a lot,
mhm,
just because you can well, since we were talking about books, you can grab something from that book, whether it is an inspiring passage or so, or it
mhm,
just sparks a different idea of how you see things.
mhm,
Um, or you can use um, certain uh, not explanations, but just imagery or so, or be able to, like right now I'm reading Don Quixote,
mhm,
and to read something from that long ago in the past and be able to see or make connections with people now. He speaks about knight errantry or so. And his character really believes he is this knight and he's off to, do away. with evildoers, and always protect, women and children, and all the common good. And we can see that today now, how we might not be seen as knights, right? But we're doing things that are noble, you know,
Mhm.
right? We're fighting for a cause. Um, and I think of actually Inspiration Poet. Inspiration Poet is an advocate right now
Mhm.
for kids who have gone through violence. And so,
Mhm.
and that itself is something that, needs to be acknowledged, that there are still people who take up that call to wanting to protect and fight for,
Mhm.
for others, to be able to live a peaceful life.
Mhm.
And so, I dubbed him, what was it? Uh, Knight of Inspiration and Protector of Children.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah, so.
I think for creatives, that's a really good point you made because I think for creatives, especially creatives with multiple passions and skill like you and I, right? I
Mhm,
think having a cause or a main message serves as a focal point or an anchor that keeps us grounded, but also even though like I am using many different mediums and talking about many different things, ultimately like I'm serving the same message, the same cause, and that's what keeps me focused. That's why it doesn't feel like, at least from my perspective, right? It doesn't feel as scattered as it used to be. Like
mhm,
my poetry, right, where a lot of what I talk about is the oneness, the being intertwined, everything being intertwined with everything else or interconnected, right? So and that's what my visual art does, my animation does, and it's really all about reconnecting us back to our wholeness and humanity, right? And that serves as a focal point where like even though I seem to be doing many different things, it all comes back to that. So there is a one thing, the big idea that
mhm.
brings it all together.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it's really good to, I think, experiment with different type of mediums.
Mhm.
Um, and
Yeah,
then actually Ten brought up something. She said before she used to live in a scarcity mindset, and
there you
now
go.
it's a more abundant mindset.
Exactly.
And so and it really is, it's like when you switch into those two different modes, you can really see the difference. And it's one of the reasons why I think helping with the purging, but also to know that things will come to you. Whatever is meant to come to you will come to you. And to believe and know and trust in the universe and in yourself that things will work out, in your benefit, um, is a good thing. I actually spoke with a friend of mine who uh, I had to let them know. I was like, you speak very negatively. You need to you need to curb and stop on the negative thinking, because I really felt that um, if you're constantly in that mindset, that everything is going to work against you more than for you, then that's all you're going to see is everything working against you.
Mhm.
And and there, it was even funny because then they brought up one moment where 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 they said they were approached by someone who asked them, "How are you doing?"
Mhm.
And they were able to flip it and be like, "Well, now they're looking down on me and see me as lesser
Yeah.
than." And I was like, "But wait a minute, you were just talking about how people don't ask you or don't talk to see how you're doing. And maybe this person was just really curious and concerned for you,
Uh-huh.
saying, 'How are you doing?'" And, and now you're and so, but because they were able to purge all this discontent last night, they actually had a really great dream afterwards.
Mhm.
And so they woke up in this really great mood because of this dream. They're an artist, so whatever they envision in their dreams, or whenever they get that good spark of wanting to draw or create, they get into it. And so they told me their dream, and I was just like, I'm so happy that you dreamt something so good, because for about an hour and a half I was like I felt drained. I felt very drained.
Right,
And
exactly.
I felt very depressed. Like, this is horrible.
Yeah.
And so it was great. It was great for them to then have a different mind setting this morning. And so yeah.
That's a really good example. And also to reiterate what Tan said, that, like in the case of my own creative expression and poetry, like about 15 years ago, like, every time, like almost every time I write a new poem that I really liked, I would go into this mindset of, oh, I'll never write another poem as good as this again, right? So that was my scarcity mindset, and that would create a real block, right? Because that would become my reality, and I wouldn't be able to write another poem for a long time, because I was thinking I was still like I was still comparing myself to myself, but my new self to my old self. So that can also be a block, not just comparing yourself to other people, but comparing yourself to your own past and putting the past on a pedestal. Because the truth is, because we're constantly growing, the future that will always be better than the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. It's so funny. I was just thinking
yeah,
about that because
yeah,
I'll look at old journals that I have
yeah.
sometimes, whether they're drawing journals or so. And it's great to see that progress, that growth or so, but that is also a thing where it could possibly hinder then,
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, well, that drawing was really great. And then you want to draw something better than what you've drawn before, but
Mm-hmm.
you have then those restraints or so on you, right? Because if it's not better than what you've already drawn, then is it any good? And it's just like, you just need to let go. Just have fun with it.
Yeah.
And kind of thing. And I was just thinking about that, was like, yeah, I should probably stop looking at my old journal sometimes and just keep going. And
Exactly.
and there's actually a quote from Andy Warhol that says, no matter the criticisms, right, of whether someone's gonna like your painting or not like your painting, like whatever your art is, um, by the time that they decide to like your art, you've already drawn more and more and more. So it's always to have that growing body of work, because the thing is, you're never going to satisfy every single critic or every single person, and but so at some point or another, someone is always going to say something negatively, but it's to continue being able to do what you like to do, and do it in the best, in your best way possible, because you're always giving your best in your work, and to just continue doing that, no matter what people may say, whether it's positive feedback or negative feedback, you're still doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. 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 In fact, like even success can be a block. Like I remember watching Elizabeth Gilbert do a TED talk, and she mentioned that you know after writing Eat, Pray, Love, because that was her first best-selling book, her first huge success, she had this mental block for a long time, because she felt like that success was like a fluke, and she felt like, oh, what if her next book will not be as successful as the first big success?
Mhm.
And for a long time, she just couldn't write, because that was her writer's block.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That is the thing. But again, I feel like that's why I like having various outlets, in expressing whatever it is I choose to express. And sometimes being able to paint or draw will then inspire me to write. and sometimes writing will
Okay.
inspire me to draw. And sometimes doing both of those things will inspire me to take photos or video and create, mini, like when you shared with me that I guess TikTok now does 10-minute videos.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that really now I think will inspire a lot of people to do videography, to do their own short movies, because those
Mm-hmm.
short movies actually do exist. There's like a 7-minute movie and an 11-minute movie. And
Mm-hmm.
one of them has to do with, it focuses on a person's hands, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so they wake up in the morning and you just see the hand like shutting off the alarm clock. You see the hands like getting ready to, they're like washing themselves, brushing teeth or so, they're making food. And then you find them like paying at a bus fare, being at work, chopping vegetables, whatever they're doing. And at the end of it, it's so beautiful. This person returns and you see a small hand clasping around, their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then it transitions into where these small hands, it's now four small hands, and each one is in the hand of those children, and
Mm-hmm.
they're massaging those hands.
Oh, wow.
And it's just and that was in a I think that was a possibly even a 4-minute video.
That is so cool. Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's so great to be around many different creatives and be around many different art forms. um, Another thing I like to do is I'm a huge fan of sound. So for me, listening to music while I write or while I paint also helps. You know, Making music also helps. I have like a harmonica and a little drum and a couple of tambourines, and so
Wow.
being able to do that like that really does help a lot to kind of put yourself in that perspective. I don't know why all of a sudden that sound made me think of Mr. Rogers. we've
Yeah,
we've
the
entered into
association to
his
your hands.
fantasy
Yeah.
world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so even sometimes a visit to a library or a bookstore, changing your environment, all of that can help. Being around, um, one of my greatest sources of inspiration and motivation are my parents.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
really enjoy visiting them and getting to listen to the stories that they have, from when they were younger, before they got married, before they met each other, to when they first started to be together. Like their whole journey is a great one to me, because without them, there wouldn't be me. There wouldn't be my siblings. We wouldn't be where we are right now because of them. And so I give a lot of praise to the origins of where I come from,
Mm-hmm.
because without them, like none of this would exist.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so for me to go back, right, is a great pleasure. And yeah, I could write stories.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it because then I come back feeling refreshed, and knowing that to write about, not just them, but just the endurance and the wonders of love. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, like I am a love poet, and so I try and write in that perspective of being just in love with life, being in love with with yourself. Self love is a great
Yeah.
topic to always touch on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Being in
Yeah.
love
Having
with,
compassion for yourself. Yeah.
yeah, 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 and being in love with like where you come from, who you are, and what
Yep.
all of those parts are about yourself is very important. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And reclaiming that, right? I just wrote a post on Facebook and my Instagram story about that when I said, you know, especially in the spiritual community, there's a lot of just waiting for the pain again to pass.
it's good.
uh,
I know it's such an interrupter. You're like, pause.
it's good. It creates that space, like you said, for us to just let things sink in. Yeah, but yeah, some people think, oh, whether you call it, God or the universe or the great mystery, oh, it's all the same. It doesn't matter, which actually, invites room for like cultural appropriation, epistemicide, things like that. Oh, there's another one.
I know. I was like, wow, that one was even louder.
Yeah.
But it happens. It happens, everybody.
Yeah.
Welcome to the cities.
Well,
I think it's moved
but
on.
yeah, I feel like I went through a significant shift when I decided to set boundaries around that, even around myself in the way I think, and I decided to be more specific because a friend of mine, Alejandro, actually wrote a whole post about this in detail, and I might interview her about that topic eventually when she's at. Even though it all seems to be the same, and we have similar deities and many different cultures, there the cultural context, what you might call the cultural clothing, the armor around it, it matters because all of the generations of people who put their own moral code into those deities
Mm-hmm.
makes a huge difference. And those deities might not like it if somebody from a different culture actually, tries to mess with them, right? And that's the phrase fuck around and find out. And that's why they end up having their own lives messed up in addition to hurting the culture. And so in my case, I feel like once I reclaimed myself as a Hindu, a Buddhist, right, a Sikh, and really thinking of the divine solely as Ma, which means divine mother in Hindi,
Mm-hmm.
and being very specific about who I'm connecting to. Like my poetry has changed partly because of that too. In the last, you know, few months, few days, even once I started really like reclaiming my culture, my cultural connections, uh, and really like loving myself fully in that way. I
Mm-hmm.
think that matters too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. It's super important. It's super important to feed the various parts of ourselves, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And to just be willing to experiment, be
Hmm.
willing to accept that, you know, if it should fail, it's all right because we learn from that as well. And again, it's all a process. It's all a journey, and you know, really the outcome is short lived. You know,
Hmm.
the outcome is it's one day or but to get there, you'll learn so much more about yourself, about what you'll like, what you won't like. Well, maybe you're willing to try again, you know, depending on the circumstances. And just again, it's a discovery. And to be inquisitive and excited about those discoveries, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Hmm. And you said earlier about like drawing, different ways of engaging with other people's work. Like I do that too, like especially with a lot of poetry with a lot of imagery in them. I
Mhm.
would actually draw throw out the images, and that helps me